Okay, good afternoon everyone. Welcome to the Advanced Credit Control for Dynamics GP webinar this afternoon. So hopefully everyone can hear me okay. The idea of the webinar today is very much just to spend around 30 minutes just to have a look at some more advanced credit control for Dynamics GP. In the session today we're going to have a look at Credit Hound, which is our credit control solution, specifically designed to work with Dynamics GP. So we'll talk about how that data comes through, because really it's a very much a system focused around credit control and how we can manage credit control, and from a very top level point of view, reduce the amount of money that we have outstanding at any one point in time, and reduce the amount of time it takes us to get paid. Okay, so the way that we tend to structure it today is we'll start off with a little bit of PowerPoint in terms of the software, in terms of the different features within it, and then we'll actually go straight into the Credit Hound application, and we'll do a bit of chasing, and we'll look at some various different screens. Then hopefully by the end of the session you'll have a really good idea about the way that Credit Hound works and the benefits that it can bring to an organization. Okay, so Draycir is an organization. Very quickly, we produce obviously Credit Hound and we sell it in the Dynamics GP marketplace. We've got about 42,000 users across the world, so it's about 6,000 organizations use our software. So lots and lots of different organizations using it in lots of different industries. Now, in terms of credit control, what we generally find is that credit control is often done via the same way, which people we tend to print off age debt reports. We go through them with a ruler and a pen and identify who we need to chase and when we need to chase them, all the way through to exporting some data out of Dynamics GP, importing it into a spreadsheet, using that spreadsheet to help identify who we need to chase, when we need to chase them, and so on. There's then a lot of other admin involved in part of that process, so it includes of capturing the notes after we've done each chase, checking for incoming payment because we don't want to chase someone that might have just paid their bill, putting diary entries in our calendars, but then reverting back to those calendar entries to check whether they're paid or not before we then give them a call, all the way to them following up with letters and emails and disputes and managing those disputes. So what we actually find is there's a lot of admin involved in credit control before we even get to the point of being able to pick up the phone and speak to someone and build the relationship, which is often the very, very important part of credit control as well. So the whole the idea of Credit Hound is where we generally spend about 80% of our time doing admin and only a lot less of our time doing the actual chasing side of things, is Credit Hound allows you to flip that on its head, because Credit Hound will do all of this admin side of things for you. So it'll identify who you need to chase and when you need to chase based on the way that you want to have Credit Hound configured, and it's something that you work with Lucy, Angela and the guys at Nolan in order to get it set up and working exactly the way that you want it to work. But the idea being is it will write all the right letters to the right companies for you based on where they sit within the chasing cycle. It will put diary entries in your calendar, but more importantly, it will take those diary entries if any payments have been made. So if you do your allocation within Dynamics GP, those diary entries are taken out. It will manage and log the disputes and manage them and get them in front of the right people in order to resolve those disputes, because obviously while someone's got a dispute, they're not paying their bill, all the way through to putting accounts on or off stop if you want to. So the whole idea really around Credit Hound is that we'll do all of the administration side, so that when you do credit control, you're very much only having to do the chasing side of things. Now, if you're a full-time credit controller, it means you spend more of your time doing the chasing and less time getting kind of bogged down in the admin side. If you're a part-time credit controller, it means that you can spend less time doing credit control altogether, because when you get involved in credit control, you only have to do the telephone and the physical chasing part. You don't have to spend your time sorting out the administration of just finding out who you need to chase and when you need to chase them. In terms of the way the software works, we pull all the data through from Dynamics GP, so you don't need to do double entry, you don't need to put information into Credit Hound. It's very much a case of we'll pull it through a replica of what's happening within GP at this point in time. We'll then start grouping that to get data together based on the different chasing actions that you want to produce. Now, the whole idea around Credit Hound is that you produce a chasing cycle. So from the point of raising that invoice through to the point where you put them on stop and you want to start legal action against them, and hopefully you don't get to that point, exactly what you want that journey to be. So do you want to send a letter when they're 10 days overdue, maybe 20 days overdue, and then maybe a telephone call on 30, for example? And then that's one example of a chasing cycle, but then you can have different chasing cycles for different types of customers. So a lot of us as organizations, we all have those premium accounts, those customers that are worth a lot of money to us, and we might want to treat them in a different way than we do for our smaller accounts. Sometimes it's very stereotypical that smaller accounts, smaller amounts of money are quite often more work in order to get that money in. But the key thing is we pull all that data through, we pull these rules to say identify everyone who's 10 days overdue, which is one of my premium accounts, and then we produce an action. And that action could be put a diary entry in my calendar, it could be write them a letter specifically to those particular customers, and so on. As we mentioned, we've got a calendar within the software itself, so they're linked to the transactions. So therefore, if anything's been paid, then those transactions are then allocated within GP. Transactions are taken out within Credit Hound, and then the associated diary entries are taken out. So very good from a credit control perspective. You know that if you come into your calendar and there's a diary entry there, it's because there's still an outstanding amount. If it's no longer there, the outstanding amount's now been paid. We keep all the notes and history all within the Credit Hound itself. So if you've got multiple people doing credit control, one of the challenges is who's doing what and who's chased who and what letters have been sent out to which customers and so on. So we keep all of that full audit trail within the software itself via the chase screen. We have a system for dispute tracking, so we'll come into that a little bit later on, but quite often in credit control disputes, credit control often like the front line, we get all the information around why the customer's not going to pay their bill, but we then need to take that to other people within the organisation. It might be account managers, consultants, sales reps, to find out, is it right? You know, is the pricing wrong? Were they meant to get a discount? All these kind of different things. But from a credit control perspective, we want to capture that information and get that in front of someone who can resolve that dispute. And for us, we want to obviously then move on to the next task. We don't want to kind of get caught up in it and spend lots of time on it, because our job is obviously more on the credit control side of things. The link into the accounting system we spoke about, so we'll pull all that data through, and there's different ways we do that in order to ensure that it's up to date. This is where I was multi-sale level chasing cycle is really where we were looking at that chase cycle and we were saying, well, actually, do we want to chase everyone as a whole, or do we want to have different groups of customers and chase them in a different way? I often work with customers that will want to create things like a bad payers group. Those organisations that, you know, as soon as you see them on the ledger, they're never going to pay you on time. They're always pay you, 20, 30 days late. So therefore, look, why don't we treat them differently to our premium accounts, the ones that are worth a lot of money to us? So we can put them into groups and categories, and we can pull through codes from GP in order to distinguish those particular groups. And we can say, okay, well, if we're going to run a roll-off for everyone who's 10 days overdue, for example, if they're in my premium account, I might put a diary entry in my calendar to give them a call. But if they're one of my bad payers, I'm going to send them a more sterner worded letter. So it's really a case of you deciding what this chasing cycle would be and the different varieties of chasing cycle you wish to have, and then it's just implemented with Credit Hound. So actually running these rules off is really, really simple. But quite often when you're trying to do things manually, it's very hard in order to have these different chasing cycles in different groups, because quite often we spend enough time just trying to get the oldest and the largest amounts of cash in without trying to say that we're going to start chasing different groups of customers in different ways. On the reporting side of things, everything we put into Credit Hound we pull up on reports. So GP already has fantastic reporting from the finance side of things. The key thing with Credit Hound is all this information we put in, we can pull up on reports. So things like disputes, for example, we can run a report and say, what's your most common dispute? How many days on average does it take you to resolve each dispute by the reason it's created? What's the average value of each dispute by the reason it's created? Really good operational information which we can then look at and maybe highlight and say, is everyone disputing their invoices because their invoice discount isn't there? Okay, well, what's our invoice discounting process? Do we need to look at that? Because while people are disputing, it means they're not paying their bill, that kind of thing. And we'll come into that a little bit later on. So there's lots of different areas within Credit Hound that we can customize. The letters and the reports and the emails are certainly one of them. We push our document distribution tool out with it, so we might have some Spindle users on the demonstration today, and that also comes with the product as well. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll actually get into the software. So hopefully everyone can still see my screen okay. So this is actually the Credit Hound screen. So I'm logging into Credit Hound as well. Now, if you have multiple credit controllers, these screens can be tailored to the accounts that I'm responsible for in terms of chasing. However, if I'm a single credit controller, I'll probably just have it on all of the accounts so I get a good overview about what's happening. Now, the idea of the screen is it really gives a more graphical image of what's happening within credit control at this point in time. So I've got things like what my disputes are at this point, what my diary calls are, got a mini age debt, we've got things like promised cash. So if I'm interacting with customers and they're telling me the check's in the post or I'll make payments on Friday, then we can record that as a promise and we can see how much cash is promised to us this week, next week and in the future. Really, really good for forecasting side of things, because then obviously we can run a report at the end of the month and see how much cash is promised to us, and that's one of the reports that we'll come into a bit later on. We can see where my money's at, so how much is overdue, how much is not due, how much is disputed. It's really designed as being interactive. Now, common themes you'll probably see is red is generally bad because it's overdue. Green means is good in the way that it's an invoice, it's not yet due, but we want to be aware of it because we can do things like preemptive chasing in Credit Hound, which is really, really effective if you're looking at bringing down your DSO, reducing that amount of outstanding debt within the organisation. And we'll come into that a little bit later on. So if I want to see who makes up my overdue amount, we just double click on our red section here, and it takes me into an account list. Now these are all the accounts which make up that £950,000 which are overdue. Really customizable, so we can customize this, we can pull through aging bands, business terms, any categories that this customer fits within. But most importantly, we probably want to look at overdue days. We can then filter that on our oldest debt that we've got here at the top, and then if we want to chase country kitchens, we double click on it and it takes us through to the chase screen. So as we mentioned, all designed to be really interactive in terms of not having to jump from one place to the next. You just double click on the information you want to look at and we can drill down to that further. So if I select an account here, I'll go on this one because we've got a good range of accounts. So I've come into an account called Festival Homes here, and we've got a number of different transactions. So in this is the customer chase screen. So I've come into Festival Homes as an account. We've got some red transactions up here, so these ones are overdue. Now we use the due date of the invoice that's created within GP, so it doesn't matter if you have every customer on different payment terms. Again, really challenging if you're trying to do it manually, but within Credit Hound, it's not a problem at all. And we've got some transactions which are yet to be due, so they're going to be due in 8 and 17 days time, so they're minus 8 and minus 17. What we can then see is if we select each transaction, we can see the notes regarding that transaction. So Credit Hound, we can send out automated chase letters, but at the same time as sending them out, we can also record them against itself. So we send the first chase letter out, second chase letter, so we see a full audit trail on all the different documents that have been sent out. And then we've added some telephone notes in here as well. Now if anything gets paid, it doesn't get deleted, it just gets filtered out. So I have a filter on here which I can unfilter, and we can show all transactions, and it will keep all the notes and history on transactions even once they're paid. Now at the bottom of the screen, we've then decided we've got everything we need from a credit control perspective to chase this account in the most effective way. So we've got our account level notes, what's happening on the account as a whole, so how much is overdue, not due, and so on. We've pulled through contacts from GP. We've put an age debt report in here. We've got turnover. We've got any of those custom analysis codes that we can pull through. So if we've got some groupings on there, we can pull them through as well. And we've also got a copy of the disputes that we've got on this particular account. If I want to chase an account, we can just start a chase. I've got a transaction here which is £8,000 overdue. We've got £8,000 here, but if I was on the phone to the customer and they're telling me they're only going to send £5,000, then obviously we can change who we're talking to and we can put part payment in here. If I put, what we then have is like reasons and objections. Reasons, you'll probably call them excuses why people don't pay their bills on time. The reasons we have this section in here is because you can report on it. So you can say, well, out of everyone we have to chase, what's the reason they pay late? Is it because the invoice is not found? Well, if it is, what do we need to do as an organisation to make sure that they get their invoice earlier? Because in theory, if we get them the invoice, then we should get rid of that excuse. In this case, I'm going to put check in the post, so it's going to prompt me for things like check number, check date, whether it was sent first or second class. These are all customizable, so you set them up based on your own industry, based on your own organisation. The key thing is once I'm chasing this customer here, the check's in the post, I can then put a promise by date. So if they're sending the check out today, I'm going to put a diary entry in my calendar for the 10th to say that we should receive the check by then. Now if on the 9th we receive the check, we do the allocation, I'll never get to that diary entry on the 10th because it will be taken out. If I get there on the 10th and that diary entry still exists, it's because we've not received payment. So I can assign that one there. What we'll then quickly do, because we're trying to squeeze everything into half an hour today, we'll raise a dispute on an account. So I've got a transaction here at the top, £16,000 overdue, nothing's disputed, 30 days overdue at the moment. I'm going to right click and add a dispute on there. Now these dispute reasons are really customizable as well. So you want to be as accurate as possible. I've got invoice incorrect there, but you want to be more accurate and say why is it incorrect. Now quite often, as we mentioned, the process for disputes is credit control on the front line, I get all the information, but I want to pass that on to other people internally that might be able to then clarify whether we can resolve this or not. And we can do that within Credit Hound, so we can capture those notes. So first of all, I'm going to capture the client notes. This is what the customer feels the problem is, the external notes essentially. I can then capture the internal notes. This is what I feel as a credit controller we need to establish and look into to identify whether this dispute is valid or not. We can then even introduce things like SLA, service level agreement. Big organizations love it because it shows they take their complaints very seriously. We love it in the collections process because if we have a date we're going to have it reviewed and a date we're going to have it resolved by, it means we're not going to end up with a month down the line with this dispute still outstanding, because while there's a dispute, there's money outstanding, and while there's money outstanding, it has an impact on our cash flow, which is really what we're trying to do with Credit Hound. The whole purpose of it is trying to reduce the amount of time it takes us to get paid and reduce the amount of outstanding debt. I can then assign that to anyone within the organization. So I'm going to assign it to Pat Stevens in accounts, copy in the customer service manager. No licensing implications in this. It's purely probably just your company contact list that you want to put in there. If I save and close that and finish my chase, now Credit Hound will make all of the administration side regarding this particular phone call that I've just made. So if I finish my chase here, it's going to generate a number of different letters for me. The first one's for the check in the post. Would I follow up in writing? Probably not. But for example, I could be trying to get hold of someone quite a few times and I want to send them a nobody available letter because I've not been able to get hold of them. I could select that and I could send that out if I hadn't managed to actually call them at all. But for the purposes of this, I'll just untick it. If I then go for the next one, it's going to generate the dispute notifications. Now, I do want to create them, and I want to send them out via email as well. So Credit Hound's going to generate both letters for me. Now, they're template-driven, so you can change them around and you can adapt them to how you want them to look. But the key thing is they're populated using information from Dynamics GP. So this is the customer-face letter. So in this case, we've got the customer notes, who it's been assigned to, the information about it's being on the transaction at the moment that they're disputing. And then I just put that off to our distribution tool, which is Spindle Pro Auto in this case, and that's going to, if we've got an email address, send it out via email. It's going to put our terms and conditions on there. It's going to put all our branding and stationery set on there as well. We've then got an internal email, which is, as you can see, it's got the internal and external notes, who is assigned to, who it's recorded by, and I'm going to print that off to Spindle as well. So within a minute, 30 seconds of coming off the phone to the customer, what I've now automatically done is if I come to my drafts folder, and again, these have just gone into drafts in case any of them exist, I've instantly sent a copy to the customer to say, dear Maureen Duffy, as you may be aware, our Homestyle Kitchens run the dispute tracking system as part of our commitment to high quality customer service. This is all the Spindle side, but obviously you have it worded exactly as you wish. You can have your logos and who it's been assigned to. They get a copy of the dispute notification letter attached with all the branding on and the terms and conditions of dispute that we've got on there as well, with the notes of what they felt the problem was. There's our terms and conditions on the last page. And if you archive your invoices and your invoices are archived to a folder structure on your network and they're named invoice and then the invoice number, then it's also possible for us to go and grab a copy of the invoice that's being disputed as well. So that's gone out to the customer, and then we've sent some copies out internally. One's for Pat Stevens to resolve. As you can see, their email's worded differently because it's designed for internal use, and one for David Owens to be aware of, and they also get a copy of both letters and the invoice as well. Keeping it from a credit control perspective, within 30 seconds of coming off the phone to the customer, I've sent out 3 different emails. That's it, I'm done, and I can move on to my next call. I haven't had to put these emails or letters together. Now at the same time, obviously, what that's also done is then created some diary entries in our calendar as well. So if I come into the calendar within Credit Hound, we'll allow that. Allow that for a second. So if we come into the calendar within Credit Hound, we can now see that we've got some diary entries in here. Now you can live link into your Outlook calendar, which is what I was doing there, so that can link through. But really you use it within Credit Hound if you're within the Credit software. As you can see, the diary entries are in here. Now, the way that the data refreshes with Credit Hound and GP is lots of different ways. So we do full system syncs, which are quite often overnight. We do partial syncs, which are quite often when you've done a lot of the allocations, so 11:30, for example. But as you know, payments are made throughout the day now. So every time we actually click on an account, we'll automatically go back within GP and we'll update what we're about to show. And obviously, that's done in a sub-second basis. On top of that, if I come into my calendar, we've got a refresh button here, which will basically say if I'm about to call someone on my calendar, I can press auto-complete. What that's going to do is look at everything in my calendar and check back within GP and to check anything I'm about to display is still valid. As you can see, a couple of things were stripped out here, so they've actually been paid. So I know that if I'm about to call this customer here, that there's no problems that we haven't received payment yet, so I can go on and give them a call. If I have a look at the diary entry, it pulls through all the notes, so internal notes, client notes. I can go and view the account, and then it takes me straight through to the account screen so I can go back in and start chasing this customer. And then, as we mentioned, that links into your Outlook as well. So that's the calendar side of things. Now, the real big time saver when it comes to Credit Hound is these rules and actions, about chasing all of your customers and looking them at a whole and identifying who sits where in the chasing cycle and sending them out the appropriate communications or putting the appropriate action against them. Now, one of the best ways to actually show that is something like preemptive chasing. Now, if you're going to take anything kind of away from today, if you wanted to look at reducing down your DSO and reducing the amount of outstanding debt that you have or money at any one point in time, then preemptive chasing is one of the most effective ways in order to do that. However, if you're doing credit control manually via spreadsheets or age debt reports or something like that, it's very tricky to do because, as you know, we spend enough time chasing the oldest and the most outstanding debt than for us to kind of flip that and say, can you start chasing a debt that isn't even due yet? However, what we can do that within Credit Hound because it can do that for us. What we're essentially doing here is we're pulling all our data through from GP and we've put some criteria around it to start grouping it together. And there's loads of different criteria that you can add. For anything from credit limits to categories, so if they're premium accounts or not, days since last chased, amount outstanding, all sorts of different things. I've basically created criteria here where we've identified all those accounts without a dispute, so automatically if there's a dispute we'll take them out. Has an invoice due in the next 5 days or due yesterday, so we're coming up to some bank holidays, so we don't want to miss anyone out over them. Not been chased within the last 7 days. So the idea behind this is if I speak to someone today about credit control, would I want to speak to them again tomorrow? Now customers, as you know, we work very hard to bring customers on board, and credit control is often a balancing act. So we work hard to bring customers on board, but we don't, and we need to get the money from them, but we don't want to push them so hard that they never want to do business with us again. But on the flip side, a customer that doesn't pay their bill really isn't a customer at all. So it's about pushing them to the point where, it's acceptable and that we can get the money back, but we maintain the business relationship. So the idea of days since last chase is if I chase them today, how many days would I want to leave it to chase them again? Now, a lot of my clients would say 7 days is well too long. You want to reduce that down to maybe 2 or 3, which is fair enough. But the key thing is you configure these exactly as you wish to have them. Has an amount outstanding over £1, and this time I'm going to put a diary entry in my calendar, and I'm also going to write them a letter. Well, what I'll actually do is I'll remove the diary entry for now, and we'll just write them a letter out. So if I run that off, Credit Hound's now looked at my whole client base. It's looked at where everyone sits within the chasing cycle. It says these are all the customers that are going to be due in the next few days. I can deselect any if I wish. If I press OK, then Credit Hound's now going to make a massive batch of letters for me of all the accounts which are due in the next few days, detailing, personalised with all their address information and contact information and invoice information of what's going to be due in the next few days. I can then print them out to our distribution tool, and as we mentioned, if we've got an email address, we'll send them out via email. If we haven't, they'll automatically get printed on a printer, put all our logos and branding on the documents as well. So if I come to my Outlook here, what we'll start seeing is all of our preemptive chase letters are starting to come out. And again, if you archive a copy of your invoice, which if you're a Spindle user is possible to do, then we can go and grab that invoice. So we're kind of saying, hi, we hope there's no problems. We look forward to receiving payment. We've noticed you're due in the next few days. Oh, and by the way, here's also a copy of your invoice. You've kind of got everything you need to make payment with us, hopefully getting rid of that excuse of people saying, I haven't got a copy of the invoice, therefore I can't pay my bill. And that same process you can set up rules and actions for all the other types of chases you want to do. So first chase letter, second chase letter. You can then have different variations of these for your premium accounts and for your bad payers if you wanted to, or for your different types of customers. And it's just really a case of then coming in and running them off. I've got an extra rule here where I'm identifying all those accounts which don't have a dispute, which are 50 days overdue, not been chased within the last 7 days, has an amount outstanding over £1. So by this point, they've probably received 4 or 5 different emails from me. They've still not made payment. Other actions we can add on. So I'm now going to put them a diary entry in my calendar to give them a call. What I could even do is actually put them on stop at the same time. So I can put them on stop and then I can send them a letter saying you've been put on stop because you're so overdue. I could actually send them a letter, put them on stop, and put a diary entry in, do all 3 of them together. So it's just a combination of how you want to do that. If you can even introduce things like calling off days, which the idea being is, if you think of that example where you put someone on stop, when you've had enough, where you've said enough is enough, now we'll put you on stop and we're going to start legal action against you. Now you can send a letter out to say if you don't make payment in the next 24 hours, then we're going to start legal action. And you can also put a diary entry in your calendar. Now, the chances are you don't want to put a diary entry in for today and follow up from that letter straight away. So what you can actually introduce in Credit Hound is calling off days. And what Credit Hound will do is it will send the letter out today via email. It will put the diary, it will put them on stop today, and they'll go on stop within GP as well. But they will actually put the diary entry in your calendar for maybe 2 days' time, which then says that's 2 calling off days. Now, if anyone rings up straight away and says, I'm ever so sorry, I didn't mean to stop payment with you, then obviously they can make the allocation within GP, and that diary entry will be taken out. So what you end up in 2 days' time is all those diary entries for all those people who were sent that particular letter that haven't made payment, so then you can follow up with a telephone call. For this one, I've just done it so all those accounts which are 50 days overdue, so if I run that one off, these are all the same people, press OK, and if I come to my calendar now, I've now got all the diary entries for all the people who are 50 days overdue, so I could go on and I could call them. Let's allow that for a second. So as we mentioned, we can come into the calendar and all those diary entries are in there for us. So it's really, as I mentioned, deciding on that chasing cycle, what you want the touch points to be, a mixture of emails and telephone calls for the different groups of customers. You kind of, as part of the setup process for Credit Hound, we've got Excel spreadsheets and pre-installation questionnaires where you can jot all that down, and then you work with the guys at Nolan who would get that set up for you and give you some training on it. The other last point to add on the rules and actions is you can't send the same letter to the same person twice. So at the same time as sending them out, we'll record them against each of the accounts as we saw right at the start of the demonstration. So if I run off that preemptive letter again, it's only going to give me the 2 people that I excluded the first time. Okay. Now you can even set these rules and actions to run on a certain time on a certain day of the week. So for example, you could have them run on a Monday, Wednesday and Friday at 11:30, and Credit Hound will automatically fire up, run the rules and actions, generate the emails and send them out automatically. That's quite a far step from the way that a lot of people are doing it at the moment, so it's something that you can often work towards, or it's not even something you have to use, but quite often people will find it that if the credit controller goes on holiday for a couple of weeks and they want credit control to carry on ticking along while they're away, they can set those rules and actions to automatically happen while they're away. Now the final area to look at in Credit Hound is the reporting side of things, and really, as I mentioned, all that information we put into Credit Hound we can pull off on reports. So we've got things like promised cash report. So I can see a report of all those people that promised us cash on or before, so you can see there's lots of filters involved in the report so you can get the kind of information you're looking for, on or before the end of the month, and now we can see all that cash that's promised to us this week, next week, and at some point in the future. It then gives us a breakdown on who's promised the cash, the reason why it was paid late in the first place, how much was promised compared to how much they owe. So for their example, they've only promised to pay £100, yet they owe £1,300. They can give us a full breakdown of that for all of the accounts. Any of the reports can be saved in lots of different formats, so anything from a PDF, an Excel file, CSV file, and so on, and then they can be sent out via email. So if I send it as a PDF here, I can save that, drop that out on an email to someone, and you can do that on any of the reports. Other reports include outstanding disputes. So when we're capturing those disputes and we're assigning them to various different people, like salespeople or account managers, we can now run reports off for those individual people or as a whole. In this case, Credit Hound's going to run a quite detailed one, or we do have a summary report on the same kind of thing, which says for each dispute what the internal, external notes were, who raised it, when it was raised on, when it's meant to be resolved by, how many days overdue it is, all the notes and so on. So they can all be printed out. We've got things like outstanding diary entries. So from a credit controller's point of view, they can see what diary entries they've got outstanding for today, and they can run kind of a tick box off for that. That's quite useful. Outstanding disputes, this is the one that I spoke about right at the start. So really good information in saying out of all of the disputes we get, which we've got here, what's the total value of disputes by reason. So here we've got goods are faulty, we've got a total of about £60,000 for them. Goods not received, we've got about £7,000. How many instances does that relate to? Well, goods are faulty, we've got 3 cases of that. Goods not received, we've had 1 instance of that. If I then look further, we can see details like how many days on average to resolve each dispute by reason. So goods are faulty, takes us 4 days. Goods not received is 24 days. So that's quite, that could be a potential problem for us. When we then look at the average value of each one, goods are faulty, £13,000. Well, it only takes us 4 days to resolve, so we're probably not going to get too much better than that. However, goods not received takes us 24 days on average to resolve. Each one's worth about £4,000. If we start getting a lot of them, then that could have an impact on our life. So what can we do as an organisation to change that? We then get a list of all those disputes that we've got, the internal and external notes for each. So if you've got an operations manager or someone who looks at the efficiencies within the organisation, this is a really, really good report for them. Exactly the same report can be achieved, but this time with callback analysis as well. So looking at the reasons why people are paying us late when we're recording that on. So in this case, we've got things like, are they paying us late because the check's in the post, or are they paying us late because the invoice is not found? What's the total value of each of those? How many instances we've had of each of those? And then giving us a list of all those accounts which have said are paying us late because the check's in the post and so on. As we mentioned, any of these reports, you've still got an age debt report, and we've got a transaction dossier here, which we can also see. So you can run lots of filters on them, and you can do greater than, equal, less than. You can pull information through from GP as well in order to help. If you've got customer groups that you want to look at, or salespeople or so on, you can start segmenting them based on that as well. So you can have up to 10 account ones, and you can have a couple of transactional level codes that are coming through from GP as well. All the way through to down, if you have multiple credit controllers, you can see user activity reports. So how many accounts have I chased, how much money I got promised in, how much money I put on dispute. I don't think anyone here would be offering me a job in credit control with only putting about £17,000 on dispute here. From a credit controller's perspective, it's a really useful report, because what we can actually do is we can have a look at out of all the accounts we chase and see which ones take up most of our time. Is it always that certain account which takes up loads of our time? Because if it is, what can we do as an organization in order to change that? Can we put them with cash with order? Can we reduce their payment terms? That kind of thing. So really, really useful information again. As we mentioned, you still have that age debt report. You still have an accounts list, so you can still filter that. You can still export it to Excel if you want to. But the idea really is that we sit within the software and we kind of navigate through from that. Other things to add is if you run a head office accounting structure, then Credit Hound can cope with that. So if you're creating invoices for branches, but you're chasing someone else like the head office for the actual payment, then you can set all that kind of hierarchy up within Credit Hound, and it will take that into account when chasing and producing letters and running reports and so on. But as I mentioned right from the start, the whole idea really around Credit Hound is we put lots of efficiencies within the credit control process to build up to a bigger efficiency of reducing the amount of time it takes us to get paid, and obviously improving cash flow within the business. Now, from a demonstration side of things, we've pretty much just been about 30 minutes there, so everything that we were looking to go through on the demonstration today. If anyone's got any questions, so if you would like to have a quote for Credit Hound, or you'd like to have a one-to-one demonstration, or you'd like to find some more information about it, then please get in touch with your Nolan account manager, and they'll be able to talk you through the process and give you a quote, or talk you through how we arrange a one-to-one demonstration if you want to look at it further. My details are on the bottom as well, but your first point of call there would really be speaking to Nolan if you've got any further questions, and they'll be able to get them answered for you. Okay, great. So there's not been any questions that have come through on the chat window, so therefore we'll probably park the demonstration there. But I'd like to thank everyone for their time today and for taking the time out to have a look at Credit Hound. I hope you all found it beneficial. Like I say, if there are any questions, feel free to get in touch with your Nolan account manager, and they'll be able to get them answered for you. If not, then again, I'd like to thank you for your time, and I hope you all enjoy the rest of the day.